Let's go! Today we're talking LSU's best player, Harold Perkins, and what his future actually looks like in the purple and gold of LSU. So, comment down below yes, I'm looking at you. Where is Harold Perkins' best position? Because obviously there is a huge debate on if he is an every down jack linebacker, which is where B.J. Ojulari played. Is he just a guy that is a sub-package kind of guy, or can he be an every down linebacker? And one thing that I've consistently seen through spring up to this point is when you see the off-ball linebackers work, Harold Perkins and Omar Speights have consistently been the first-team linebackers, okay? So, obviously, there's a lot of competition there with Omar Speights joining the fray, and then, of course, the Greg Penn experience last year got better as the season moved on. And then, of course, the Weeks brothers, the younger one, the true freshman, Witt, is at LSU, and West, of course, is a returner who played a fair amount last year. So the first thing I want you to notice is obviously playing off ball is very different than what Harold Perkins did for the most part last year. He was more so a pass rushing specialist who sometimes lined up behind the nose tackle versus the center, sometimes lined up on the edge as a jack, but also at times lined up off ball. Sometimes he was put into space because he was the third linebacker, acting kind of like a modern day nickel. So a linebacker playing, the traditional outside linebacker spot that you're used to seeing in a 4-3 defense. But rarely, if ever, was he one of the set two linebackers that are on the field 90% of the time. Last year, it was mostly Micah Baskerville and Greg Penn with some Wes Weeks mixed in there after Mike Jones was put down to third team. And then, of course, DeMario Tolan got some of those reps last year. So, I know that was a lot of information here to start off today's video, but Matt House actually spoke on Harold Perkins recently.
Well, we know Harold has some elite ability, but he came here to learn to play linebacker and not necessarily just a hybrid. And the spring's kind of a great time to do that. You learn the techniques and fundamentals associated with playing the stack position, he's still playing out in space some, and it's just going to enhance his game and really what he came here to be.
Just with Harold, you get to spend as much time with him as anybody on the field. Just how have you seen him grow, not only as a player, but as a person here in year two?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is he's got a better understanding of our process and how we prepare, and that's the biggest thing. His habits are much more consistent, and as I said last year, that hasn't changed. He just loves football.
I'm looking at you. Yes, you. And if you are a super diehard LSU football fan, you got to join our PHL Patreon, where we just dropped a huge Harold Perkins film study as to why I think they are making him an off-ball linebacker, okay? And a big reason is that's where he wants to play, according to Matt House. And remember, Matt House was very key in the later parts of Harold Perkins' recruitment. And, of course, this could end up being one of the biggest recruiting wins in the history of LSU football, because it was tough to flip him from Texas A&M. So, obviously, there is a learning curve going on, but that's the case for all three levels of the defense. Now, I understand this isn't the typical offensive film study that gets a ton of views, but I'm going to be honest with you. I feel the LSU defense has some major question marks going into next year. Now, I am not necessarily concerned about the talent of the LSU defense. And one thing that Matt House did say in his press availability, that he is very happy with the versatility of his defense. I do think, though, finding who works where the best is going to be a little bit of a learning process, right? Obviously, Perk playing the new position, is going to be a little bit of a learning process. Omar Spates coming in, well, we know he could play at a Division I Power 5 level, but what do you do with Greg Penn? Is that a guy who has so much experience that you want to leave him on the bench? I don't know. Those are the questions that LSU is going to have to answer in the off-ball linebacker room. But I will tell you this, okay? Even though we don't have a whole lot of film, per se, even in high school of Harold Perkins playing, a lot of coverage, he does have great ball skills. This was one of the best running back high school tapes I've seen. Once again, Perk is not a running back, but he was that good at running back in high school at a difficult level of football in Houston. But also something else is there were spring clips released last year where Harold Perkins was lined up as off-ball linebacker, and he made plays. Like, it was amazing how good he was at tracking the football. So the more I think about it, the more I like this move for LSU, and I can't wait to see what he actually does. Now, you saw a minute ago, one of the best softball linebackers ever at LSU, Patrick Queen, will be at the PHL get-together April 22nd at the Arklatex Card Show, baby. And there may or may not be some Harold Perkins autographs there. So make sure you come hang out. It is a totally free event. And Jeray Jenkins is also going to be out there. His autographs are free. So that is very cool that you have not one but two LSU national champions that are going to be there. And, oh yeah, by the way, the number one rated LSU women's basketball recruit, Michaela Williams, will also be there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, what's going to be very interesting is who actually does play the jack. You see the jack linebackers over here getting some work in. That is going to be so key. And, I went back and I'm doing my own NFL draft evaluations. I'm trying to be better at prospect evaluation. I've gotten a lot of messages about my Harold Perkins evaluation from last year. But I'm trying my best to get better at that. And here is, I said no quarterback stuff, but here's some quarterback stuff at the end of this video. One thing I will mention is B.J. Ojulari's season last year may have been underrated. I know, well, here he is telling us that B.J. Ojulari's good, no duh. But honestly, he was very, very freaking good. And there were quite a lot of players that went into last year with a crap ton of hype that had a lot of playing time from years prior, and they did not live up to expectations. They did not live up to the billing. Man, B.J. Ojulari did, and he might have very well exceeded those expectations, which is crazy considering his snap share was so freaking high last year because LSU didn't have a whole lot of depth at the jack linebacker. They elected to not really play Desmond Little all that much there, and if B.J. wasn't on the field, it was just Perk playing that role. So, man, Ojulari's role is going to be so difficult to replace next year. There's just no other way around it. And, obviously you have the leadership aspect, but goodness gracious, it is just going to be so crucial to see who will actually step up and play that jack linebacker role. Now, something else, I know I mentioned, the PHL Patreon a minute ago, but one thing I do want to bring up is we have done a lot of quarterback breakdowns on Patreon, quarterback mechanics and all that good stuff, so make sure you go over there and check that out, okay? Now, I have really gotten good feedback on our women's basketball coverage, and I don't know, I was jolted by how much fun I had at the Final Four this past weekend in Dallas. So, really shout out to them, but we're going to do more LSU women's basketball stuff in season, but at the same time, this is still an LSU football channel. So, there you go. Now, one thing that, and once again, if you want to see more quarterback breakdowns, go to Patreon. I do want to add something here, okay? Of course, LSU played the Purdue game, and that game was basically versus a JV squad. I would say that Purdue, at their current state with all their opt-outs and no coach really, I think that was the worst Power 5 team we played all of last year. Remember, LSU's schedule last year was very tough, but obviously with Florida State, kicking things off there. One thing about the LSU defense, and I don't think this is really a debatable fact here, they were really bad versus Georgia and really bad versus Texas A&M. So I got into a debate with my good buddy, as you guys know, Blake Ruffino. I'm on there every Monday at 7:30. The Georgia game, I will give LSU a pass defensively for not being so great in that game, because if you actually go look at the yard per play metrics, Georgia's Georgia's offense really was so freaking good last year. They only had one game of under 6 yards per play, I believe. That is pretty much what 2019 LSU did. They only had one game under 6 yards per play. That is really hard to do. I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing that Matt House's defense got ripped to shreds in that game. Remember, that was essentially a Georgia home game, right? That was the only time LSU has gone back-to-back on the road in quite some time. And I know it wasn't a true road game, but still, it was a back-to-back road game. So it was also a back-to-back situation where LSU's defense was playing two really good teams in a row. Okay? So that's obviously tough when you play two top 15 recruiters in back-to-back weeks. But the truth is Texas A&M's team wasn't that good. They just weren't. Offensively, the week before they struggled versus, I think, UMass or somebody like that. That game versus Texas A&M was very brutal. The lack of adjustments and all of it. And, what's really interesting is the LSU defense was mostly better at home than it was on the road. Yeah, they had that great game versus Arkansas, and they were a great team defense in that game, and Arkansas didn't have their quarterback in that game. And the Auburn game was good. You had a defensive touchdown. Once again, it was B.J. Ojolari that really won that game for us. But they did average over 6 yards per play with Robbie Ashford at quarterback and a lame duck coach. So LSU's defense away from Tiger Stadium was not where it needed to be. And that's going to be very key, because I'm going to be honest, the more I think about it, the more whoever you are watching this right now, you don't get enough credit, because the LSU fan base really makes things difficult for opposing teams. And the noise, the atmosphere, the energy, we've been talking about this with women's basketball. Kateri Poole, one of the most crucial transfers in LSU sports history. She was the reason why Angel Reese also came to LSU. She said a main reason was because of how much she loves the fans and how good the fans were when she was playing with Ohio State. I'm telling you, if you go look historically and you go look at the LSU defense historically, they are so much better at home than they are on the road. I think about Dave Aranda's 2019 LSU defense. They only gave up over 30 points in a game 4 times in 2019, and all 4 of those games were on the road. At home, they were overall a pretty solid defense. So, that's going to be very key, and I think that's something LSU is going to look into. How can they translate better defensive players, defensive performances on the road instead of just at home? Because remember, Mississippi State, we dominated, especially in those critical portions of the game. Alabama, especially outside of those magical Bryce Young plays, they were amazing. So yeah, we'll see how that turns out. So I hope you enjoyed the spring practice breakdown. This one's a little bit more laid back, and as you know, anytime I can do a video on Harold Perkins, I'm going to freaking do it, okay? It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! And tonight, we are doing, some Cajun Creole pasta. We're going to put some chicken, we're going to put some sausage, and floating in your face is our spring practice breakdown playlist. Check it out. Let's go.